All right, Dawn, it's 12:29. We've got some people joining in, so let's go ahead and kick it off.
Kick it off. Well, okay. So this is, I guess, is this our third or fourth Q&A session?
Number three.
Number three. Okay, and counting. So, yeah, when Adam sends out the notices that we're going to do this, the schedule, we ask folks to send in questions. And I got a bunch of good ones. However, if you didn't get a chance to send in a question and you have one, you can type it in the Q&A or chat feature online right now. So let's see what some questions were you guys had. Should we use an Omni and a directional antenna together? So let's expand this a little bit and say there could be a time when that would be the right thing to do. I would not expect that to happen very often. Generally, you don't want to use multiple antennas. People have an idea that, gee, if we put more antennas in the, we'll point one to cover this corner and point one to cover that corner and point one to cover that corner. If you're in the same room, what's going to happen? Well, let's see, whether you're in the same room or not. Okay, what you need to avoid when you use multiple antennas. So this is directional antennas together. I don't know if the person asking the question is talking about like inside and outside, then of course that would be a good thing to do. When you use multiple antennas, what you want to, so you're getting more coverage, but what you need to pay attention to is that you really want your transmitter to only ever see one pair of antennas, one A and one B, right? Because when they see more than that, you're sending too much information to the receiver, and it's going to be a little different in time, right? Because the antennas aren't going to be together, so it's going to take more time to travel to one antenna than another, and so you're going to get a smeary signal at the receiver. So if you're using multiple antennas together, you'd like something to separate them somewhat. So if we're talking about indoors and outdoors, if you have a church where you have a sanctuary, but you want to stick an Omni antenna outside the building because you're going to have a bake sale in the parking lot, that would be a good thing to do. You have the walls separating your signals somewhat. If the antennas are all in the same room, then you have to use something. Well, first of all, to combine the antennas, but you have to use something to balance the level of the antennas. We make a 4-zone combiner that does that nicely. You can do it with individual pads. It's kind of messy to do it that way, but you can do it that way. So using multiple antennas when you have multiple coverage areas. If you have 4 different classrooms, then we're going to put a pair of antennas in each classroom. But if we have one fairly large room, right? So if we have a room like a convention center, that's really big, we're probably going to use multiple antennas. But even then, we're probably going to pad them down, trim the gain on the antennas so that they don't overlap so much. So of course, Omni and directional together depends on what you're trying to cover, right? So you're always trying to pick the appropriate pattern on your antenna to cover where the transmitters are going to be, right? Directional antennas, you need to point them at the transmitters. If the transmitters are going to be all over the place, then maybe that doesn't work, or you have to pull all the way back to one end, and so you might use an Omni. If you use Omnis have to be kind of in the middle of the total coverage area, and directional antennas can be on any of the boundaries pointed in. So I hope that answers the question. Let's see. Wondering if the FCC will be selling off more of the spectrum anytime soon. So there was a plan. They were going to sell another, I forget how much, but another 40 something megahertz off, what we've got now when they sold off the 600s. There was a follow-up plan on the book signed off by the president all the way back to, it was Obama that signed it off. So it's been on the books that long. It was in progress, but everybody sort of realized they didn't need to do it. And so, you know how omnibus bills are in Congress, it actually got removed. It actually was taken off the books, signed off. We're not going to do it, approved, check mark. In the first COVID relief package that happened, the one that happened right after Biden first became president. So what was that, the second or third one? It actually got removed. What that has to do with COVID, I have no idea, but that's where it got removed. So right now, there's nothing on the books. If they come out with something tomorrow, it probably will have, like 6 years of lead time, something like that. They don't do this quickly. So this isn't something they do even in a year. So I know of nothing. There's no rumors flying around right now. Everything you have, everything you have is going to work as good as it's going to work. I mean, obviously, crowding in the spectrum is a problem, but you won't have to sell your mics and buy them over again like you've had to a couple of times when they sold the 700s, when they sold the 600s. So right now, there's no plan that I know of, and no rumors of a plan coming out. So that probably makes you good for at least 6 years starting from today. However, that could always change. I imagine that'll change as technologies change. 10 years from now, the radios that we'll be using will probably be a lot different. There's kind of been a new trend in the last it's been worked on for the last 10 or 15 years, and now we're starting to see it all over the place, what they call software-defined radio. So now when you make a radio receiver, the frequencies that it can tune to are controlled by software, not by crystals. If you remember back enough, when you bought a radio that did, X frequency, there was a crystal inside that radio. And everything tuned off that crystal. So if you wanted to change to a different frequency band, you had to replace that crystal and then retune the radios. But now that everything is software, it's possible to build a receiver that can go, from DC to light. I mean, they can put it any place they want. All they have to do is change code. So all you got to do is update it. That's the receiver. Now, unfortunately, antennas don't work that way. Antennas are very much physical size specific. So as frequencies get lower and lower, the antennas have to get bigger and bigger to work with them. So you might have a radio that today could tune really high and tomorrow could tune really low. You'll have to change out the antenna system, but you won't have to buy a new receiver. So I hope that's what you were asking, because that's what I know about it. I got a bunch of questions about this. I kind of rolled it all into one question. I got asked about quarter wave and half wave and combining a few receivers. And so I can put it all together. So let me talk about the difference between quarter wave and half wave antennas. A half wave antenna is just 2 quarter wave antennas in the same package. So it's just an L, like it's just a piece of wire, right? Signal comes in, it bends up, that's the antenna. That's a half wave antenna. What it doesn't have is a second path. It needs a ground. So when you use quarter wave antennas, they have to be fastened to the chassis of your receiver, or you have to build a ground plate, right? If you have a half wave antenna, the second half, the bent wire that goes down, so you got a bent wire that goes up and a bent wire that goes down. That's a half wave antenna. It's the same wire. They just put two of them in the package. There's 5 more cents, but that's what they do. The second half of the antenna acts as the ground. So that antenna can be removed from the chassis. You can put it on a cable and you can put it wherever it needs to go, I guess. So if you have a situation where you just have a couple of receivers, 2 or 3, or, you can do it with more, but it starts getting hard to do. So with 2 or 3, actually with 3, I would really recommend getting a distro, ours or somebody else's. That's going to work better because as you split, we're going to use one, it said same antenna, but we're going to say same pair of antennas, right? A and B. So every time you split the antenna, you divide the power up. So if you have 2 antennas, so if you had one antenna, one pair of antennas going into receiver, it gets the full power that it can receive in the antennas, right? If I split that, I'm now sending 50% of the antenna to receiver 1 and 50% of the antenna to receiver 2. In other words, I'm only getting half the strength, right? So that keeps happening. So dividing it much more than that, the losses start to become a problem. It's possible. If you have really good signal and really low interference, you can do it. But of course, when you use a distro, when you use an active distro, then that doesn't happen anymore. So you could have a really big number of channels. But what we see a lot would be like maybe a school classroom or something, where they've just got a couple, or a small church, where they've just got 2 receivers. And maybe even they've put them in a closet, so you can't see the antennas. That's a problem, right? So if the antennas are behind a wall or behind a door or something, that's a problem. So we just came out with this package of things. This is our 2-channel antenna kit. This has a pair of half wave antennas. The two whips at the top are half waves. It comes with 2 mounting brackets. So if you do have your 2 receivers inside a closet, you can bring these out of the closet, put these on the wall, and then leave your receivers, locked in the closet. Then it has a pair of 2x1 splitters, one for the A side, one for the B side, and all the cables you need to hook it up. So this is kind of the way to do it. You can do this with other people's splitters. I mean, a splitter is a passive, it's a passive split. You don't want to do this with a T connector. You don't ever want to use T connectors for wireless microphones, except very, very low frequency, which I don't even know whether you'd find that anymore. They'll work down in VHF TV land, but they won't work up in UHF. They won't work up in the 470 to 608. You got to have isolation. So these little boxes are more than just a splitter. They're transformer balanced to isolate the signals from each other and maintain the impedance so that everything works. So this is an easy way if you've just got 2 channels to do it. With 3, so the answer to this is you could buy a 3-channel splitter. We don't make one. You'll have to look. There are some on the market, but now the signal, you've cut 2/3 of the signal out, right? So you're going to get a pretty weak signal. So you better not need much signal if you're going to do that. So that's why I wouldn't do that, but it is possible, just not recommended. How close in frequency can multiple brands of wireless systems be? Well, that's a good question. And the answer is it depends on the kind of system that you have. So analog systems must be at least 125 kilohertz apart. And even at that, they still will bump into each other. So we would recommend 300 kilohertz or so, maybe 250, but I mean, it's the farther apart you can get them, the less they interfere with each other, right? So 2 radios always interfere with each other. When they're digital systems, the nature of that means that they need to be 600 kilohertz apart. Okay, the signal is more dense. I was going to say stronger. Stronger would be amplitude. The amplitude's the same, but it's got more, it's heavier signal. Maybe that's the best way to put it. You know, one's bricks and one's feathers. So it's a very thick signal. So we need to keep it farther apart because it interferes more. And if you're mixing, if you're using both analog systems and digital systems, then you treat them as digital, right? So they want to be 600. Now I should also say, this says wireless systems. So this includes in-ear monitors, right? So if you're using analog in-ear monitors and digital wireless microphones, you need to treat that entire system as digital and keep 600 kilohertz apart. I mean, it might be possible under some conditions that you might squeak by, but that you don't want to. So for mixed systems, you want to keep the channels at least 600 kilohertz apart. Now, just because you do that, now you still have to worry about harmonics and stuff. So when you have multiple ones, so when we've got 2 channels, 3 channels, 27 channels, the exact spacing of those, even though they're 600, is going to create harmonics. And the harmonics begin to get closer together, and the harmonics interfere with each other. So the harmonics, you know, when they're strong enough, are more radio channels. You'll measure them. They're there. They're just nonsense, but they're there. So that's why you need to use a frequency coordination program. Or if you just have a small number of wireless mics, almost everything now has like banks, right? So you pick bank A and it's got 8 frequencies in it. If you only use that brand, then those 8 channels are designated because they have the least amount of interference to each other. If you're mixing brands, though, that doesn't work anymore. So you have to use a frequency coordination program. That's just something. If you're going to do this, if you're going to be in wireless mics for the long run, you need to familiarize yourself with the coordination programs. Every manufacturer has, the biggest manufacturers have them. They are free. You can mix brands. You can use the Shure one with, you know, multiple brands. You can use the Sennheiser one with multiple brands, Audio-Technica with multiple brands. You'll have to type in some numbers, but it works, and they're free. You can buy ones too, but the free ones work pretty darn good for almost everything. So personally, I wouldn't spend the money anymore. 6 years ago, I spent the money and bought a $600 program to do it, and now the free one does everything that would have done. Is using the Shure AXT-600 as the only scanning device a good idea? Well, the Axient 600 is a really cool box. It's expensive. It does a lot of other things besides just scan. So maybe answer this. So it's a very good device. If you have an Axient system, it does a bunch of other things that make it, you know, worthwhile to have if you have an extra $5,000. But let's talk about anything to scan with. So you need to be able to scan outside of just the frequencies you're going to use, right? So if you're going to use, if you walk into a place you've never been before, you have the ability to go from 470 to 608, right? Now, maybe you've got a block of microphones that only goes from, you know, 490 to 530. So if that's all you can do, then all you need to do is scan between whatever I just said, 470 and 530, and scan about 50 megahertz on either side of that, because things outside the band are still interfering with things that you intend to use. If I don't know for certain how far the Axient goes outside its bands. So if you're in the US it's going to be 470 to 608 or 616. There's kind of some little exceptions. I never say that because honestly, the exceptions are going to be darn near impossible for everybody to use. So don't go thinking you're going to make that work unless you're, you know, at an ice station in Antarctica or something. It might work, but in a city, you're going to have a lot of problems. So whatever you use to scan. So let's take this back. Almost all the wireless mics right now that you can buy from Shure, Audio-Technica, or Sennheiser have that free program, and you can network from your receiver into your computer and use your receiver as a scanner. But the receiver can only see the frequencies it can tune to. So things that are right next to you, it can't see. So if there's things right next to you, and there probably are, that's not the best scan in the world. It's certainly better than nothing, but it can't, it's just blind to what's right next to you, right? So, you know, there's a bear standing outside your front door, you'd probably like to know about it. And so you have to make sure that whatever you're using to scan with, well, the best thing to scan with is something that can see about 50 megahertz outside whatever you intend to use. That would be the best thing to do. The more data you can give these programs, the better these programs work, right? So if it doesn't know what's going on, it can't predict what might happen. So the more you can show it, the better. So the Axient thing, specifically this is a really cool piece. If you have an Axient system, it does a bunch of other stuff as a scanner. It's pretty good. It has a high sampling rate. So that's the other thing you want to have is a good sampling rate. So this is an excellent product. If you have an all Axient system and you have a budget for it, I would own one of these. But just scanning in general, you want to be able to scan outside, out of band, we call it, because there's a lot of information right below the, you know, anymore, everything is crowded, right? Not just the wireless mic band, but all the other things, all the other bands are bumping up right against other bands, right? You know, bandwidth is like beachfront property. They're not making anymore, so we got to share it. And it's full. There's no great unknown spots. They're all filled up. So something is right next to you, and it'd be good to know about that. Oh, I like this question. Will installing a diversity fin antenna or any other antenna reduce noise for an IEM signal? So in general terms, antennas, there isn't an antenna you can buy that will reduce noise. It might have filtering on it that could reduce noise. We make the bandpass interference filters. There are manufacturers that build those into their antennas, but it's not the antenna. Antennas are dumb. They just catch whatever RF energy they can catch, you know, for however they're tuned, right? So they're like a microphone. Right now, there's some microphones that pick up more bass. There's some microphones that have reduced bass, so they're better at speech, but they're picking up everything, right? You make noise in front of the microphone and it's going to pick it up. You make radio waves into an antenna, it's going to pick them up. They don't exclude anything. So strictly speaking, no. If you're buying an antenna to reduce noise, that's not going to happen. Now, I should add a second part. You know, all of this always depends, right? And whatever I'm saying, you know, I can find exceptions to, but we're not going to bother with the, you know, 1 in 10,000 things, you know, that are going to happen. In the case of a diversity fin antenna, if you were replacing a whip antenna with a diversity fin antenna, it likely would reduce noise. So a directional antenna will likely reduce noise compared to an omnidirectional antenna, because an omnidirectional antenna is picking up the radio waves from every direction around you, where a directional antenna is only picking up the waves in front of you. That means it's only picking up the radio interference that's in front of you. So strictly speaking, directional antennas almost always have lower noise floors than omnidirectional antennas. But and that has to do with pattern. So the wider it is, the more it's picking up. There might be some slight differences. Pretty much all the directional antennas, the LPDAs, the shark fin paddles, are all about the same. The slight differences in the width of them. The omnis are all omnis, right? So they're picking up the noise in front of you and the noise behind you. So yeah, so in the case, so if you're talking about specifically, I've got a whip antenna on my IEM receiver, and you put a directional antenna, although you wouldn't use a diversity fin because that's two antennas. So you would use hopefully a helical antenna, and that will reduce some noise pickup. But don't count on your antennas to reduce your noise. There's other ways to do it with the bandpass filters. That's how we reduce noise. That's what we ran out of. I see there's one more question that came in there, Adam. Can you read that one to me? Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't, oh, there it is. How well?
A couple of questions.
I got two here. So one just says, hi, Dawn. The other one is, how well will a diversity fin work through walls? I have a unique situation.
I'm sorry, how well will it work through a wall?
Yes.
Depends what the wall is. It depends basically how much metal and how much water is in that wall, right? So a brick wall, bricks have moisture content, right? Concrete has moisture content. You're going to lose some. I mean, it's hard to say. If you have, if you have sheetrock walls, but you have metal studs, you've got a metal wall. So you're going to lose some signal. The question always is, how much can you afford to lose, right? And so if you have a really strong signal, so back to my, my one and only point that I ever make, you have to get your transmitter, through the air, down all the stuff into the receiver, and the signal from your transmitter has to be 20 dB hotter than your noise floor. Typically, I would expect the signal to be 30 or 40. If your signal is 40, you can afford to waste, you don't want to give it up, but you can afford to waste 20 dB. So if you had a 20 dB loss in your wall, that would still work. So if you're very close to your antenna, it might work. What I would recommend that you do, if you have to do this, is simply, set your antenna up that you're going to use, set your receiver up, put your transmitter on, and see how strong the signal is, right? You're going to see LEDs go up and down. So let's say you get 5 LEDs. Now, put your antenna and your receiver behind the wall. How many LEDs do you get? And if you're still getting 3 or 4, you're probably going to get away with that if you don't have too much other interference going on in the room. So this is going to be harder to do with 24 mics than it will be with one mic. That's going to matter because the mics are going to raise multiple mics are going to raise the noise floor. So what I would recommend, you can try to research all that stuff, but who knows how much moisture content the concrete in your wall has. I don't know. The quickest thing to do would be just, try it on both sides and see if it works. If you're getting if you're getting 1 or 2 LEDs on the other side, it's probably gonna work, but it's probably not gonna work very well. I wouldn't leave that. If you're still getting 4 on the other side, there you go. You're good to go. So that would be the easiest way to do it. You could try to calculate all this stuff out, but it's much faster to just do it, see what happens. And there was one more?
No, that was it for now. So if anybody has any further questions, definitely plumb them in now. We're happy to address them.
So I'm sorry, my signal dropped here for a second.
No worries. Yeah, that was the only questions we had here, Don. So unless anyone has further questions, pipe them in now. We can answer. or you can always just shoot us an email later on. We're happy to address anything you might have missed or have a question further on.
Yeah, you're welcome to call me on the technical support line anytime in business hours, of course. Thank you. Or send an email. We're happy to answer questions all the time. I mean, we just want what you want. We want this stuff to work the way you expect it to work, the way your customer expects it to work. That's all we want. We want everybody happy. So if it works, everybody's happy. Let's straighten the stuff out. Anyway, with that, I guess I will sign off. So thank you very much. Happy holiday season. Merry Christmas. Happy Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, Festivus, whatever you celebrate. Maybe you celebrate them all. That'd be the smart thing to do. More parties, more feasts. I like it.
Hold the horses, Don. We got one more question. Maybe we can do it.
One more question. See, you bet.
All right. Is there a way to reduce the noise floor from wireless mics to improve reception to IEMs?
Yes. I mean, split them farther apart in frequency. So all the microphones interact with each other. Those interactions are a little garbage and they add to the noise floor. So if you can put your wireless microphones all the way at one end of the band and your in-ear monitors all the way at the other end of the band and have as much separation between the two as possible, you actually, when you do that, you want to try to tune your wireless microphones all together. You want to try to tune your IEMs all together. So it'd be nice if they're all in the same block. If you have wireless microphones, if you have a wireless microphone at 480, one at 530, one at 560, and one at 600, you don't have any way to do that. So that, unfortunately, I run into people all the time that have bought a little this, then they added a couple more mics, then they added a couple more mics, then they added some IEMs, then they added some more IEMs, and they're all in between each other. That's not going to be easy to do. You can do it, but you're going to have to be really careful. So if you're buying a new system or you're just adding on, you want to try to keep your mics in the same block, and it can be the low end or the high end. That doesn't matter. What matters is the separation, because the closer they are together, the higher the noise floor is. So the separation between the two things is helpful. And you can add the interference. You can add the bandpass interference filters. So if the IEMs are out of the range of the bandpass filter, then they become invisible. It's like they're not there. So you remove all the noise that they add from the wireless mics. Usually that's a bigger problem, right? Because they're more powerful. So the IEMs are probably adding more noise to the mics than the mics are to the ears. That would be typical. So if you put the bandpass filters, that's going to get you some additional relief.
Awesome. Thanks for that last question, Dawn. Looks like we're good to go here. So again, reach out to us directly, and we all from RF Venue hope you have a great holiday and Happy New Year. And we're wishing you luck on all your wireless projects, and definitely reach out if we can help at all in any way.
Yeah. So we'll see you all next year. Thanks.